Under the pitch-black sky of Atchison, Kansas, where the cold winds whisper like the voices of the dead, the Sallie House stands tall, an accursed specter in the night. No one knows exactly when that fateful night took place. Time itself seems to have erased the horrifying memory, but people say that one evening in the mid-19th century, when the pale moon was shrouded by clouds, a frantic knock shattered the silence of Dr. Charles Finney's home. It was not the knock of the living. It echoed, heavy and relentless, as if the darkness itself had come to claim a soul. Dr. Finney, a man who lived alone with secrets no one dared to question, trembled as he opened the door. Before him stood a woman, her face deathly pale, her eyes wild with fear. In her trembling arms lay a 6-year-old girl, her frail body writhing in unbearable pain. The girl's scream pierced the air, sharp as a blade slicing through the night, as the mother cried out that her daughter's appendix was about to burst. Without hesitation, Finney sprang into action, carrying the child down to the basement, a dimly lit operating room where the suffocating stench of blood and antiseptic fused into the very air of hell itself. By the flickering light of an oil lamp, Finney's hands shook as he injected anesthesia into the girl's fragile body. But in a moment of panic, or perhaps in the arrogance of a man who believed himself to hold power over life and death, he made a fatal mistake. The dose was either too strong or too weak, for the girl awoke just as the scalpel sliced into her flesh. Her scream echoed through the basement, not the cry of a child but the wail of a soul betrayed. Blood gushed forth, her wide, terror-filled eyes locking onto Finney's as the blade cut deeper. And then, in a horrifying instant, her final breath dissolved into the shadows. They say that at that precise moment, a frigid chill engulfed the room, as if her spirit had sworn never to leave. That is the chilling tale whispered about the Sallie House, one of the most haunted homes in America. But the truth behind the veil of legend is as fragile as a spider's web. No records confirm the death of a girl named Sallie in that house, nor is there any documented proof that such a horror ever took place. Yet the specter of doubt lingers. Charles Finney was indeed a doctor who lived there, and the house had been built years earlier by his cousin Michael C. Finney. The Finney family remained tied to the house for generations, and more than a few of them took their final breaths within its cold walls. The wind howls through the cracks, the wooden floors groan under unseen footsteps. Are these the traces of restless spirits? Or a warning from something far more sinister, lurking in the darkness, waiting for its next victim? There is no proof of Sallie's existence, but the fear is real. And when night falls over Atchison, people still whisper that if you stand before the house long enough, you will see a small, pale face appear behind the upstairs window, its hollow eyes staring straight at you, as if beckoning you into a nightmare from which you may never wake. When Tony and Deborah Pickman stepped through the door of 508 North 2nd Street in the early 1990s, they had no idea they were entering a realm where light could never truly reach. The Sallie House, with its silent walls and the scent of old rotting wood, seemed to greet them with a cold, mysterious smile. They came with the hope of building a home, as Deborah was pregnant with their first child. But instead of the laughter of a newborn, what echoed through the house were sounds that did not belong to this world. Within a month, darkness began to rise, slowly but surely, like a hungry beast stalking its prey. At first, the signs were subtle, enough to make their hair stand on end but not enough to banish reason. The lights flickered as if unseen eyes were watching, dimming while they watched TV as if someone from the other side was toying with the circuits. The chains on the ceiling fans spun wildly, clinking in the still air though no one had touched them. Deborah, fascinated by the supernatural, tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was the wind, perhaps faulty wiring. But Tony, a practical Catholic who did not believe in ghosts, began to feel an unnatural chill creeping under his skin every nightfall. Then came the baby. Their little boy could not sleep in the nursery. Every time they placed him in his crib, his terrified screams shattered the night, as if something unseen was standing beside him, whispering horrors into his ears. Deborah brought him downstairs and strangely, he slept peacefully as if nothing had happened. But the moment they returned to the nursery, his wide eyes filled with panic, staring at something the adults could not see. One night, Tony walked past the room and froze. The light was on though they had just turned it off. In the middle of the floor, 3 teddy bears sat in a perfect circle, as if engaged in some eerie ritual. He called Deborah and her sister to check, but no one admitted to touching them. They placed the bears back on the shelf, turned off the light and walked downstairs, only to hear a sharp click as the light flicked on again. The teddy bears had returned to the floor, sitting motionless in the dark as if waiting. From then on, everything escalated at the speed of a nightmare from which they could not wake. Tony heard hurried footsteps racing up and down the stairs at night, light, quick, like those of a playful child. He assumed it was the cats, but when he went to check, the staircase was empty. Then, in the deep silence, he felt an icy wind pass through him, accompanied by the eerie sound of a child's giggle from nowhere. One afternoon, while taking a nap, Tony suddenly sat up, his eyes vacant as he stared straight at Deborah and growled, "He is mine," before collapsing as if he had never woken at all. Family photos on the walls flipped upside down, glass shattering as if some unseen force resented their presence. An unlit candle melted into a pool of wax, leaving behind the imprint of tiny fingers, fingers that did not belong to any child who had ever lived in that house. Desperation led them to seek help from the show sightings. When the film crew arrived, they captured terrifying phenomena, tiny flames flickering and dying out, burning selectively on objects as if guided by a malicious will. A doll was found scorched from the inside, its plastic eyes melted like tears of blood. Tony began to believe that something in the house wasn't just playing games, it wanted to destroy them. Deborah, on the other hand, became convinced that they were living with the ghost of a little girl named Sallie, a harmless spirit who only craved attention. The psychics they invited agreed. They saw a small girl standing on the staircase, her sorrowful eyes gazing down, whispering that she wanted to protect their baby. But Tony sensed something Deborah could not, a cold, hateful presence watching him with dark intent. Then the darkness struck. One night, Deborah stepped out of the bathroom and found Tony clutching his leg, groaning, "It bit me." On his thigh was a clear bite mark, small but sharp, like the teeth of an angry child. Scratches began to appear on his body, deep, crimson, sometimes oozing blood, sometimes stinging as if invisible claws were raking through his skin. One morning, Tony went to the kitchen for water, only to turn around and see a little girl standing at the basement door. She wore an old-fashioned white dress, her sunken eyes filled with terror, her body hazy like mist. As he screamed and ran upstairs to find Deborah, he realized he had just faced something not of this world. But Sallie, if that was truly her, was not alone. On another night, Tony lay in bed, listening to the relentless scratching within the walls, like the nails of dozens of imprisoned souls. Suddenly, outside the window, sparkling dust began to darken, forming the shape of an old woman in black. She floated toward him, her white eyes burning with fury. The closet door burst open, the bed shook violently as if gripped by invisible hands. She reached for his throat, growling, "I will," before morphing into a massive black bird and vanishing. Tony screamed in terror, but in the next room, Deborah heard nothing except his desperate cries. Was it a nightmare or was something toying with his mind? Tony began to question his own sanity. The scratches grew worse, the shadows more defined. And when the sightings crew returned, everything escalated. Before the cameras, red marks appeared on Tony's skin, slowly carving out the letters MC. Michael C. Finney, the man who built the house. Was it a warning or a declaration of ownership from the other side? The Sallie House was no longer a refuge, it was a prison. And Tony was becoming prey to something far beyond human comprehension. When Tony and Deborah Pickman hastily fled the Sallie House in 1993, they thought they had escaped the cold embrace of darkness. But that house, with its blood-stained walls and the whispers of restless spirits, was not so easily willing to let go of anyone who had ever stepped inside. The door may have closed behind them, but the echoes of terror remained, stretching through time like an unbreakable curse. And what happened next only proved that the Sallie House was not just a home, it was a gateway to something far worse. After the Pickmans left, a mysterious woman moved in. Few knew anything about her, only that she lived alone, as silent as a shadow. But when the landlord came to inspect the property, he stumbled upon a sight that made his blood run cold. The house was in ruins, furniture smashed to pieces, and in the basement, once the surgical room of Charles Finney, strange symbols were scrawled across the walls in a dark red substance of unknown origin. In the center of the floor, a massive black pentagram had been painted, marking the site of some sinister ritual. The woman had transformed the basement into an altar for something far darker than nightmares. She was immediately evicted, but the remnants of what she had done served as a warning. Something inside this house did not just exist, It was waiting, it was calling. The basement had long been considered the dark heart of the Sallie house. In its deepest corner, a section of brick wall had been broken away, leaving a gaping hole as black as the maw of a hungry beast. Tony once said he never dared step down there. Every time he approached, an unbearable chill wrapped around his legs, as if unseen hands were pulling him toward the abyss. Some whispered that the hole was not just an empty space, it was a prison for lost souls, or worse, a portal to a realm no human should ever touch. The Sallie house quickly became a hotspot for ghost hunters and paranormal investigators. The Ghost Adventures team once brought Tony and Deborah back, and almost immediately the darkness rose to greet them. Tony felt the familiar sting of claw marks raking his skin, while eerie EVP recordings captured chilling voices, "Help me, don't go, stay here." He began to wonder if he had misunderstood everything. Were these just lost spirits crying out for help, or was it all a carefully laid trap by something far more cunning? Other investigators did not escape unscathed. Objects moved on their own, dark shadows flickered through camera lenses, and fiery red scratches appeared on their skin, as if marked by an unholy vow. The strangest thing, however, was that despite the overwhelming terror, many felt an inexplicable pull back to the house. It was as if the house whispered into their minds, planting the seed of an obsession they could never shake. Hundreds of videos, photographs, and recordings have been collected from the Sallie house, turning it into a shrine for those who crave an encounter with the unknown. One of the most chilling pieces of evidence came from the Astonishing Legends podcast in 2018. They placed a recording device inside the nursery, the same room that had once made the Pickmans' baby scream, and left. When they returned, what they captured was more than just sound. It was growling, scratching, and a distorted voice from the abyss, as if the very space inside that room had come alive to tell its story. Listening to it, your heart skips a beat, just as mine did, sending an icy shiver down your spine, making you wonder if you truly want to know the truth. Now the Sallie house stands in eerie silence, yet filled with an undeniable presence, like a challenge to the living world. It is not just a haunted house, it is something alive, feeding on the fear of those who dare step inside. Is it truly the spirit of Sallie, or is something else wearing her face, hunting those who enter? No one knows for sure. But if you are brave enough, you can visit and find out for yourself. Just remember, once you step inside, you may never truly leave. If this story made your heart race, don't forget to like, share with your friends to send chills down their spines, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more terrifying mysteries. We will continue to bring you nightmares you'll never forget.